but independent beings that are able to transmit information. And in one of my books, I talk about my Ouija board experiences. And when I made this contact together with a friend, we not only began to receive information, but also these series of beautiful poems that were given to us letter by letter. And when you sit back and you read these poems, uh, you see that there was an intelligence behind them. It's not, the current theory when it comes to Ouija board is that the Ouija board, how it functions, how, what's behind its mechanism, what's the mechanism behind the Ouija board, that it's supposedly some type of uh, muscle, involuntary or subconscious, unconscious muscle phenomena that makes the planchette in the board move. And for those of you that are not familiar with a Ouija board or a planchette, basically the Ouija board is this board that has the alphabet from A to Z, numbers from 0 to 9, and the words yes or no. And this plastic device with a circle, like a hole in the middle, and people place their fingers lightly, and after some time, the it's called a planchette. The planchette starts to move and spell out messages letter by letter, through the Ouija board.
And of course, there are instances. I think a lot of people have played with the Ouija board at some point, and I think a lot of people have had the experience of somebody at the table moving that thing around and
Sure,
sort
yeah,
of
there's some
building discredit,
right people that
in the
fake it.
thing. So I want to hear. I want to. How do you know that your original experience wasn't faked? Wasn't the person you were with just being a
Okay.
maybe he was a poet and
Right.
he was
Well,
writing poetry.
it's interesting because after a few sessions, that me and my friend had, we began to tell our friends about it. This is back when I was in my 20s, and we began to tell our friends about it, and they were curious, so they would, ask to be present at some of these sessions to see if we were faking it or we were faking them. And as fate would have it, one night we had a group of three friends together with me and my other friend that were the operators of the Ouija board. And it's interesting because we were getting one of the poems, and I'm sure some of our friends were thinking, well, maybe, I wonder if this is real. They're pulling our leg and whatnot. One of the messages that was spelled out was, do not become afraid. And I remember me asking, why would we become afraid of anything? Because we already know that this wasn't like some evil,
Yeah,
thing that we were doing
you've
or
been
anything.
working with it for a few days.
For a few weeks, right? And so when I asked, why, and then the messages began to be spelled out. It said because 2 minutes after this message is recorded, lightning is going to strike, and the electricity is going to go off, as a consequence. And I'm paraphrasing here, but don't be afraid because the electricity will return in less than 1 minute. So one of my friends.
And this whole thing was written out letter by letter.
Right. And 2 minutes, so 2 minutes from the time that the message was recorded, this was going to happen. So when we finished, obviously recording all this and understanding what it is that was going to happen, supposedly, one of our friends had a watch, and he was the most incredulous of them all. So he had his finger pointing to his watch, and he was like counting the seconds until the 2 minute mark. So right at the 2 minute mark that he points to his watch, trying to say, "You see, you're full of crap."
So he was the one that was skeptical.
Yes.
Of the group. Yeah.
Well, they were all probably skeptical, but he was the most vocal and more sarcastic of them all. So right when he points to his watch, we saw flashing lights outside the window, and then the rumble, and then boom, electricity went off. So everybody was like, "Whoa, surprise! What the?" We didn't know. We were all surprised. I was in shock because, think about the implications of what just happened. So then, my another friend had a lighter. He was a smoker, so he, turned on the light, the lighter, and was pointing at the watch, and then right about, I don't know, like in the 52nd second or something, right before the minute, then electricity went back on. So what had happened, if you think about it, is that three predictions had come true in sequence. Because I mean, how many times? I mean, first of all, I'm not aware of anyone being able to predict lightning. Say, okay, well, at
Right.
at 8:55 a.m. today, lightning is going to
But
start.
if there was a storm outside, it would
Or
have been going off.
right,
Was there a storm
nothing.
outside?
No,
There was no previous lightning.
no previous lightning. If it was sprinkling, we weren't aware because it wasn't like hitting the windows or the plants outside. So it wasn't like anything that
Right.
was that we would notice. But then after the electricity went off, it said the prediction said that it would come back in, that it would come back in 2 minutes. I'm sorry, that it was 2 minutes until it happened. Then that the electricity was going to go off. How many times is there lightning and electricity goes off?
Right.
I mean,
True. That's true.
that's a
Lightning hits.
50-50.
Yeah.
Maybe
Or
or
less.
less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it
Yeah.
happens, maybe it doesn't happen. And how many times it could take maybe a few minutes or a few seconds or a few hours or until the next day to come back. But it said
Right.
no, in less than 1 minute. So that sequence of predictions made me understand that this wasn't something that was coming from muscles, or that obviously our friends understood that we weren't faking them, and most importantly, the poems. There was a genuine intelligence behind this phenomena that we had tapped into for whatever reason. And, I became even more curious about the supernatural and the spirit world. And I, began this, exploration of altered
Right.
states of consciousness
Right.
and what have you.
And you have those poems or some of them
Yes, and they're,
in your book?
yeah, they're published in Back from the Void. Soon to be available ebook Kindle edition. You can get them because they're sometimes they're hard to find. They're old books, from like 10 years old, but soon to be available on ebook form. And again, this changed my whole outview on what reality is. It's not what we think it is. It's something much deeper
And
than that.
so this sort of segues a little bit, Zoe, this conversation about this help from an intelligence. I mean, there was obviously some sort of intelligence in
No,
the.
it was a group of intelligences, and they all had different names, and each gave us a
Ah,
poem. That was like
oh,
their
wow.
introductory
So do you
card.
think those were people who, or entities that had previously been people?
Yeah,
Was this
we
the
asked them.
afterlife?
Well, actually, well, I mean, I get into this in detail in the book, but according to what we're told, they were me and my friend Freddie were part of a soul, an oversoul, if you will, and that they were us in the future, and they were communicating with their past, so that a particular connection or like a psychic connection had to be made, and it's almost like a feedback loop.
Wow.
It's something that had to occur so that we could be in the same timeline.
And you were how old when this happened?
I was in my, late 20s. This is
And
like in
you
1989. We're talking about, I don't know how many years ago, 20s.
and you hadn't been
something years
studying.
ago.
You had not been studying the occult or the
I had
supernatural,
it
or
was
yes?
yeah it was starting to tap me in the shoulder. I had read a book, I remember, by a psychologist called Brian Weiss, called Many Lives, Many
Oh,
Masters.
I've read that book. That's a great book.
So and I had began reading another book by Seth and Jane Roberts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Seth Speaks, I think it was called. Yeah. And so those two books, it was again, it's like I was being something was tapping me in my shoulder, saying, listen, pay attention to this, because this is going to be part of your life, which became my research and my books. And now I'm here in Brazil as a result of all this research and all these studies.